The rain began as Catherine Morrison stood beside her husband's casket, a gentle mist that turned the cathedral steps slick and treacherous. 10-year-old Genevieve gripped her mother's hand with fingers gone white at the knuckles. Theodore stood on the other side, shoulders squared in a gray suit 2 sizes too large, borrowed from a neighbor's son who had outgrown it years ago. Inside the vaulted sanctuary, 600 people filled the pews. Nathaniel Sterling Morrison's funeral drew architects and city planners, college classmates, and country club members. People who knew him as the brilliant mind behind the waterfront renovation project, the historic preservation advocate, the man who could see beauty in condemned buildings that everyone else wanted demolished. Kate knew fewer than 20 of them. She watched the mahogany casket, smooth and perfect, chosen by her mother-in-law without consultation. Vivian Pembroke Sterling had selected the flowers, too. White lilies, dozens of them, their cloying sweetness filling the air, until Kate felt dizzy with it. Nate had loved wildflowers, daisies and black-eyed Susans, the kind that grew along roadsides and required nothing but rain and sunlight. The minister spoke about eternal rest and God's mysterious ways. Kate's gaze drifted to the stained glass windows, jeweled light falling across the congregation in pools of crimson and gold. Through the colored panes, she could see the cemetery where they would lower her husband into the ground in less than an hour. 48 hours ago, Nate had opened his eyes in the ICU, squeezed her hand, and whispered 3 words she didn't understand. Trust. Foundation. Letter. Then the machines had screamed their mechanical grief and nurses had pulled her away while doctors fought a battle they couldn't win. The drunk driver who'd crossed the median and struck Nate's car head-on had walked away with a broken arm. Life's mathematics rarely balanced. Vivian Sterling sat in the front pew, her spine rigid in a black Chanel suit, not a silver hair out of place. Harrison Caldwell Sterling, senior partner at Sterling Whitmore and Associates, sat beside his wife with the same courtroom composure he brought to billion-dollar litigation. They had not looked at Kate once during the service. Behind them, row upon row of strangers in expensive clothing dabbed at their eyes with monogrammed handkerchiefs. Real grief was quieter than this. It sat in the back of your throat like broken glass. It made your chest so tight you forgot how to breathe. It turned the world into something viewed through water, distorted and strange. Evie's hand trembled in hers. Kate looked down at her daughter's face, so like Nate's it hurt. The same gray-green eyes, the same thoughtful expression, the same way of tilting her head when listening to something important. Since the accident, Evie had been drawing dark pictures, houses crumbling, storms, figures drowning in oceans of black ink. Theo stood soldier straight, jaw clenched, 10 years old and already trying to be the man of the house. Last night, Kate had found him checking the locks on all the windows, a task his father had performed every evening before bed. The boy carried grief like a backpack filled with stones, refusing to set it down even when the weight made his shoulders shake. The service ended. The congregation rose in a rustle of silk and wool. Kate guided her children down the aisle past faces that blurred together into a single mass of polite sympathy. At the exit, Vivian materialized beside them, like a beautifully dressed ghost. the children should ride in the family car. Her voice carried the crisp authority of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. Harrison and I have arranged everything. Kate felt Evie's grip tighten. Theo moved closer to his mother's side. We'll follow in our car. Kate kept her voice steady. Thank you. Vivian's pale blue eyes flickered with something that might have been annoyance or might have been grief. With Nate's mother, the two often looked identical. Catherine. The name came out like a correction. The family car is more appropriate. People are watching. Kate had learned during her first dinner at the Sterling estate 7 years ago that in Vivian's world people were always watching. Life was a performance, and every gesture carried weight in some invisible ledger of social standing. We'll follow in our car. Kate repeated and moved past her mother-in-law before the conversation could escalate. Their Honda sat in the parking lot between a Mercedes and a BMW. 15 years old, reliable but unremarkable, the kind of vehicle that disappeared in cathedral parking lots. Kate unlocked the doors manually. The key fob had stopped working months ago, and Nate had been meaning to replace the battery. One of 1,000 small tasks death had rendered permanently incomplete. The cemetery occupied 10 acres of manicured hillside. The Sterling family plot commanded the highest ground beneath ancient oak trees that had witnessed a century of burials. Granite monuments rose like miniature cathedrals marking the resting places of Nate's grandparents. Great-grandparents' ancestors whose achievements were carved in stone for eternity. Industrialist, philanthropist, beloved father. The words reduced whole lives into single lines. They buried Nathaniel Sterling Morrison beside his grandmother, the woman who had left him everything and trusted him to use it wisely. The grandmother, Vivian, never spoke about the one whose estate had been tied up in trusts and foundations and legal arrangements that excluded Vivian entirely. Kate had met her once 6 months before the wedding. A fierce woman in her 90s, bright-eyed and sharp-tongued, who had looked at Kate over tea and said something that made no sense at the time. You'll need to be stronger than you think you are, dear. Stronger than anyone imagines. The graveside service lasted 15 minutes. The minister read from Ecclesiastes. Mourners dropped roses onto the casket. Kate stood with her arms around her children, while the cemetery workers waited at a respectful distance with their machinery ready to complete the work of burial. Once the living had retreated to their cars and catered lunches, Harrison approached as the crowd began to disperse. He moved with the measured stride of a man who billed in 6-minute increments, every gesture calculated for maximum efficiency. Catherine, the children. He nodded to Evie and Theo. We should discuss arrangements. Tomorrow afternoon, perhaps, at the house. Our house, Kate thought. But it wasn't, was it, the townhouse they'd lived in for 10 years, where the twins had taken their first steps, where Nate had built bookshelves in the living room and a window seat in Evie's bedroom. They'd never discussed ownership. Nate had handled the finances, paid the bills, managed the details that made a household function. Kate had trusted him completely. I'll check my schedule. She kept her voice neutral. Harrison's expression suggested that people did not check their schedules when Harrison Sterling requested a meeting. People adjusted their schedules, but he simply nodded and walked back to where Vivian waited beside their black town car, watching the scene with eyes that revealed nothing. A stranger stood apart from the crowd. A tall man in his late 40s with prematurely gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He caught Kate's gaze and gave a small nod, respectful but deliberate. She didn't recognize him. Another of Nate's professional acquaintances, probably. Another person who knew her husband better than she had known him herself, apparently. The drive home took 20 minutes through streets that looked wrong in the afternoon light. Everything looked wrong now. The world had continued without Nate in it. Traffic lights, changing people going to work, children playing in parks. The fundamental unfairness of it made Kate's hands shake on the steering wheel. Evie sat in the back seat with her sketch pad drawing something Kate couldn't see. The scratch of pencil on paper had become the soundtrack to their grief. Theo stared out the window, tracking the passing scenery with eyes that didn't seem to register what they saw. The townhouse stood in a row of identical brick facades 3 stories tall. Black shutters and window boxes that Kate had planted with geraniums every spring. She pulled into the narrow driveway, noting the lawn needed mowing. Nate's job. Another task she would need to learn. Inside, the silence pressed down like a physical weight. Nate's jacket still hung by the door. His coffee mug sat in the dish drainer, washed and waiting to be used. The New Yorker lay open on the side table, folded to an article about urban planning that he would never finish reading. Evie went straight to her room without a word. Theo stopped at the bottom of the stairs. "Mom," his voice cracked on the syllable. "Are we gonna be okay?" Kate knelt to his level, this serious boy who looked so much like his father in miniature. She wanted to promise him safety, certainty, a future where everything would be fine. But she had learned in the past 48 hours that promises were fragile things easily shattered by drunk drivers and ICU waiting rooms and caskets being lowered into the ground. "We're gonna figure it out together." She pulled him close. "Whatever comes, we face it together." He nodded against her shoulder, and she felt the wetness of tears he was trying so hard not to shed. They stood that way for a long moment, mother and son holding each other upright in the wreckage of their world. The days after the funeral blurred together into a gray sameness. Casseroles appeared on the doorstep. Sympathy cards filled the mailbox. Well-meaning neighbors stopped by with offers of help that felt more invasive than helpful. Kate moved through the motions of survival. Make breakfast. Get the children to school. Grade papers. Make dinner. Check homework. Repeat. Each day a mountain to climb, each night a small victory of having survived until bedtime. Vivian and Harrison began visiting on Thursday afternoons. They never called ahead. They simply appeared dressed as if for court or the country club, bearing gifts the children didn't want and advice Kate hadn't requested. "You'll need to make decisions about schooling." Vivian sat on the edge of the sofa as if afraid it might contaminate her suit. "Whitfield Academy has an opening for the spring semester. I've spoken to the headmaster." Kate looked up from the bills spread across the dining room table. Mortgage, utilities, car payment. The numbers swam before her eyes, refusing to add up to anything sustainable. The twins are happy at Jefferson Elementary. She kept her voice even. Their teachers are wonderful. Public school. Vivian said it the way some people said infectious disease. Catherine, we must think of their future. The connections they'll make, the opportunities. Harrison leafed through a catalog he'd brought, glossy pages featuring children in uniforms standing in front of ivy-covered buildings. Whitfield has an excellent college placement record, 98% to Ivy League institutions. They're 10 years old. Kate returned to her bills. We have time to think about college. Children from the right families begin preparing in elementary school. Vivian's tone suggested this was common knowledge, something only the ignorant would question. Nathaniel would have wanted what's best for them. Kate's pen stopped moving. She looked at her mother-in-law, this woman who had criticized every choice Nate had made, from his career path to his choice of wife, and was now claiming authority over his final wishes. Nate wanted them to have a normal childhood. Kate closed the bill folder. He said so many times. Nathaniel was under considerable stress toward the end. Vivian smoothed her skirt. His judgment may have been compromised. The words hung in the air between them, sharp and deliberate. Harrison shifted in his chair, and Kate caught something in his expression. Discomfort, maybe, or recognition that his wife had crossed a line. That night, after the Sterlings had left and the children were in bed, Kate found herself in Nate's study. She hadn't entered the room since the accident. His laptop sat on the desk, password protected and sleeping. Architectural sketches covered the walls. Projects completed, and projects dreamed. A photograph of their wedding day occupied the corner of his desk. Kate in her grandmother's simple dress, Nate in a gray suit. Both of them laughing at something the photographer had said. She opened the desk drawer. Files of household paperwork organized in Nate's meticulous handwriting. Behind them, a leather journal she'd never seen before. Kate lifted it carefully, as if it might crumble at her touch. The pages were filled with Nate's handwriting, dated entries spanning the past year. She turned to the final entry, written 2 weeks before the accident. They're circling again. Mom called 3 times this week with suggestions about the children's schooling, their activities. Our neighborhood. She speaks in code, but the message is clear. She doesn't think Kate is good enough. She never has. I've tried to build a wall between Kate and their judgment, but I won't be able to protect her forever. I need to make sure she understands what's coming. I need to tell her about the foundation, about what grandmother left me, about the plans I've made. But how do I explain that I've kept this from her? How do I tell my wife that I'm secretly wealthy while we've been living paycheck to paycheck? She'll think I didn't trust her. She'll think I was testing her somehow. The truth is simpler and more complicated. I wanted our love to exist independent of money. I wanted to prove to myself that she chose me, not the sterling fortune. And I wanted to shield her from becoming the kind of person my mother is. Money changes people. It changed my parents into something calculating and cold. I won't let it change Kate. I won't let it change our children. Tomorrow I'll call Whitmore. It's time to set the final pieces in motion. time to make sure that if something happens to me, Kate and the twins will be protected. Protected from my parents. Protected from the weight of wealth. Protected from everything except the truth that matters. That they are loved. That love is enough. Kate read the entry 3 times, her hands shaking. Foundation, trust, letter. His final words in the hospital, the ones she hadn't understood. Nathaniel had been trying to tell her something, trying to warn her. But warn her about what? She searched the desk drawers, finding nothing but household bills and architectural magazines. No foundation paperwork, no trust documents, no letter explaining what any of this meant. Either Nate hadn't had time to leave the instructions he'd planned, or they were somewhere Kate hadn't thought to look. The visits continued, every Thursday like clockwork. The Sterlings arrived with their suggestions and their barely concealed judgment. They criticized the twins' clothing. They questioned Kate's meal planning. They suggested with increasing lack of subtlety that Kate's teacher salary was insufficient for raising children properly. You could accept our help. Harrison said it reasonably, as if offering a business solution to a simple problem. Move into the guest house at the estate. The children would have more space, better security. We're fine where we are. Kate had repeated this so many times it had become a mantra. We're managing. Are you? Vivian's gaze swept the living room, cataloging the worn furniture, the scuff marks on the walls, the toys scattered across the floor. Managing is not the same as thriving, Catherine. 6 weeks after the funeral, Kate woke to the sound of a diesel engine idling in the driveway. She looked at the clock. 6:15 in the morning. Far too early for a delivery. She pulled on her robe and went to the window. A moving truck sat in the driveway, its cargo bay open and waiting. 2 workers stood beside it, checking something on a clipboard. Kate's heart began to race. She ran downstairs, unlocked the front door, stepped onto the porch. The morning air was cold against her face. "Can I help you?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. One of the workers looked up. "Morrison Residence." "Yes, but I didn't order any moving services. We're here on behalf of the Sterling Family Trust. We have authorization to pack and remove household items as per the property agreement." Kate's knees went weak. "What property agreement?" A black Mercedes pulled up behind the moving truck. Vivian emerged first, dressed in wool slacks and a cashmere sweater, followed by Harrison with his ever-present leather briefcase. "Good morning, Catherine." Vivian's tone was brisk, businesslike. "I apologize for the early hour, but we felt it best to handle this efficiently." "Handle what?" Kate's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "What are you doing?" Harrison opened his briefcase and extracted a document. "This townhouse is owned by the Sterling Family Trust. Nathaniel had usage rights during his lifetime, but those rights were not transferable. As of his death, the property reverted to the trust." Kate's world tilted. "That's not possible. This is our home. Your residence," Harrison corrected gently. "Not your property. I have the deed here if you'd like to review it." The front door opened behind Kate. Evie appeared in her nightgown, clutching the stuffed rabbit Nate had won for her at a carnival 4 years ago. Her eyes were huge in her pale face. "Mommy." Her voice was small and frightened. "What's happening?" Theo pushed past his sister, already dressed in jeans and a t-shirt as if he'd been awake for hours. Maybe he had. The boy slept poorly these days. Vivian's expression softened fractionally when she looked at her grandchildren. "Darlings, don't worry. Grandfather and I are here to help. You're going to come stay with us at the house. Won't that be lovely? Your own rooms, the pool, the tennis courts. What about Mom?" Theo's voice was sharp with suspicion. "Your mother." Harrison paused, choosing his words carefully. "Your mother will need time to make appropriate arrangements for her future. In the meantime, you'll be with us." Kate found her voice. "Absolutely not." "Catherine, be reasonable." Vivian's patience was wearing thin. "Look at your situation. A teacher's salary cannot support 3 people in this city. You have no family to help you. The responsible choice is to allow us to care for the children while you get back on your feet. We stay together." Kate pulled Evie and Theo close to her sides. "That's not negotiable." "Then where will you go?" Harrison's question was calm, clinical. "You have 72 hours to vacate the property. Do you have somewhere lined up?" Kate's mind raced through possibilities. Her salary couldn't cover first month's rent and security deposit on an apartment. She had $800 in savings. Her parents were dead. Her sister lived in Oregon with 4 kids of her own and barely made rent each month. Her friends were teachers and artists, people who survived month to month, just like she did. "We'll figure it out." The words sounded hollow even to her own ears. "Mom." Theo's voice cracked. "Where are we going to go?" Evie had begun to cry, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. Kate felt something break inside her chest. Some last barrier between her and complete despair. "You're being cruel." She looked at Vivian, then Harrison. "Your son just died and you're doing this to his children. We're trying to help them." Vivian's voice turned cold. "We're trying to give them the life they deserve. The life their father would have wanted them to have. Their father wanted them to have a mother who loves them." Kate's own voice shook with fury now. "He wanted them to grow up knowing that family means more than money, or property, or social status. Family." Harrison closed his briefcase with a decisive click. "We are their family, Catherine. We are their blood. You're just—" He stopped himself, but the damage was done. The unsaid word hung between them as obvious as if he'd shouted it. Just the teacher. Just the woman Nate married against their wishes. Just the obstacle between the Sterlings and their grandchildren. "Get out of my house." Kate's voice was quiet but absolute. "You have no right to be here." "We have every right." Harrison gestured to the moving truck. "The property is ours. The eviction notice is legal and binding. You may keep your personal belongings, but everything else remains with the house." The next 36 hours passed in a blur of packing. Kate called in sick to work. She filled boxes with clothes and books and the children's artwork. The movers stood by watching, occasionally helping to carry furniture that wasn't Kate's to take. The sofa stayed. The dining room table stayed. The bed she'd shared with Nate, the bookshelves he'd built, the kitchen table, where they'd eaten 1,000 meals together. All of it stayed. Evie packed her art supplies with trembling hands. Theo made lists of what they were taking, trying to impose order on the chaos. Kate worked mechanically, wrapping dishes she wouldn't be allowed to keep, folding linens that belonged to the Sterling family trust. On the second day, a knock came at the door. Kate opened it to find an elderly woman she recognized from the neighborhood. Grace Holloway lived 3 doors down, a widow who had moved to the block before Kate and Nate had married. They'd spoken occasionally over the years, pleasantries about the weather, compliments on Kate's garden, nothing substantial. Grace held an envelope. "I heard what was happening." Her voice was soft but firm. "I'm sorry for what you're going through." Kate took the envelope, too tired to question the gesture. Inside was a key and a handwritten address. 412 Pine Street. "My nephew owns a small house across town," Grace explained. "He's been looking for someone responsible to rent it. The place needs work, but the rent is manageable if you're willing to do repairs yourself. 3 bedrooms, a yard for the children." Kate stared at the key. "I don't understand. Why would you help me?" Grace's weathered face creased into a sad smile. "Because sometimes the only family that matters is the one that chooses to love you. And because I've lived long enough to see that wealth and character don't always travel together." Kate's eyes filled with tears. "I can't afford much. I don't know if I can afford anything. The rent is $350 a month. First month is free if you start the repairs within the week." Grace pressed the key into Kate's palm. "My nephew believes in helping people who need a hand up, not a handout. You work for what you get." "Fair enough." Kate nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. "Go look at it this afternoon." Grace patted her hand. "It's not much, but it has good bones. Strong foundation. Sometimes that's all you need to start rebuilding." The house on Pine Street looked like it had given up trying years ago. The paint had peeled away in long strips, exposing gray wood beneath. Several windows were boarded with plywood. The front steps sagged dangerously. Weeds choked what had once been a lawn, but it had a roof, 4 walls, and 3 bedrooms. It had a backyard with an old oak tree perfect for a tire swing. It had a kitchen with enough counter space for Evie to spread out her art projects. It had a basement where Theo could set up the model train set his father had given him for his 8th birthday. Kate stood on the cracked sidewalk with her children, all 3 of them staring at their new reality. "It's ugly." Evie's voice was small. "It needs work," Kate agreed. "But we can fix it. Together." Theo walked up the steps, carefully testing each board before putting his full weight on it. "I can help fix things. Dad taught me how to use tools." Kate's heart broke and mended simultaneously at the determination in her son's voice. "I know you can, sweetheart. But you're still a kid. You don't have to fix everything." "Someone has to." Theo looked back at her, and in his 10-year-old face she saw echoes of the man he would become. Responsible. Protective. carrying burdens too heavy for his age. They moved in the next day. Their belongings fit into Kate's Honda with room to spare. Everything important, it turned out, could be packed into boxes and garbage bags. Everything else was just furniture. The house was worse inside than out. Water stains bloomed across the ceiling in the kitchen. The bathroom tiles were cracked and missing in places. The hardwood floors buried under decades of grime were scarred and dull. But the bones were good, just like Grace had said. The walls were solid. The foundation was sound. That first night, they slept on air mattresses in the living room, too exhausted to tackle sorting bedrooms. Kate ordered pizza with the last $40 in her checking account. They ate by candlelight because half the electrical outlets didn't work, and Kate didn't know which breaker controlled which room. "Tell us about when you and Dad first moved in together." Evie's request was tentative, as if afraid the story might hurt too much to tell. Kate looked at her daughter's hopeful face and realized that stories were all they had left of Nate. Stories and memories and the legacy of love he'd built with every day he'd been their father. "We had an apartment near the university." Kate settled back against the wall, pulling both children close. "Smaller than this house. Your father was finishing his master's degree and I was student teaching. We had a mattress on the floor and 2 folding chairs and dishes we'd collected from yard sales." "Were you poor?" Theo asked. "We didn't have much money," Kate corrected gently, "but we were rich in other ways. Your father would surprise me with flowers he'd picked from the campus gardens. We'd have picnics on our fire escape. Once a week, we'd cook a big meal and invite friends over, everyone bringing what they could afford. Pasta and bread and cheap wine and laughter." "Were you scared?" Evie's voice was almost a whisper. Kate thought about those early days, the uncertainty, the struggle to make rent, the constant calculation of whether they could afford both groceries and gas money. Sometimes, but scared in a good way, like standing at the edge of something wonderful. Evie considered this seriously. Are we scared in a good way now? Kate looked around the empty room at the water-stained walls and the missing floorboards and the dark corners where their single lamp couldn't reach. She looked at her children's faces, watching her for reassurance she wasn't sure she could provide. But beneath the fear and exhaustion and overwhelming uncertainty, she felt something else stirring. Something stubborn and fierce. She thought of Nate's journal entry, protected from everything except the truth that matters, that they are loved. "Yes." She pulled them closer. "We're scared in a good way, because we're together and that's what matters most." Outside, the wind rattled the old windows. Inside, in their small circle of light, the Morrison family began the work of building a new life from nothing but love and determination and the stubborn refusal to be broken. The next morning, Kate found Evie in what would be her bedroom, sketching on the dusty floor. For the first time since the accident, the drawing wasn't dark. It showed a house simple and small, with light glowing from every window. 3 figures stood in front holding hands. Above them, barely visible, another figure made of stars and moonlight watched over them. Kate knelt beside her daughter. "Is that us?" Evie nodded. And Dad, he's still watching over us, right? Kate's eyes blurred with tears. Always, sweetheart. Always. In Theo's room, she found her son measuring the walls with a tape measure he'd salvaged from Nate's toolbox. He was making notes on a piece of paper, planning where furniture would go, how to maximize the small space. I thought I could build shelves. He didn't look up from his measurements, like Dad did in our old house, for my books and stuff. That sounds perfect. Kate watched him work, this serious boy trying so hard to be strong. But Theo, you know you don't have to be the man of the house, right? You're allowed to just be 10. He finally looked at her, and his expression was far older than his years. Dad's gone, Mom. Someone has to help you. Kate sat beside him on the floor. We help each other. That's what family does. You help me, I help you, we all help Evie. No one person has to carry everything. Theo's composure cracked slightly. I'm scared you can't do this alone. I'm scared they'll come back and try to take us away again. Kate pulled him close, feeling his thin shoulders shake with suppressed tears. Listen to me. I will never ever let anyone take you away. Whatever it costs, whatever I have to do, we stay together. That's a promise. They sat that way for a long time, mother and son, holding each other up in the ruins of their old life, beginning to imagine the shape of something new. Part 2. 3 months into their new life on Pine Street, Catherine Morrison discovered that poverty was less about lacking money and more about the constant mathematics of survival. She could tell you the price of milk at 3 different grocery stores, knew which day the bakery marked down yesterday's bread, had memorized the bus schedule that minimized waiting time between her 3 jobs. Mornings began at 5:30. Kate would wake in the dark shower quickly in water that took 15 minutes to reach the 2nd floor. Dress in clothes she washed by hand to save laundromat quarters, and prepare breakfast for children who needed to believe their mother had everything under control. Evie and Theo were usually already awake, moving quietly through the house that announced every footstep. Theo checked the locks each morning, a ritual born from the eviction. Evie sat at the kitchen table with her sketchpad drawing by weak overhead light. Breakfast was oatmeal flavored with whatever Kate could afford that week. Honey when she was lucky. Cinnamon most days. Once memorably maple syrup that Margaret Brennan from 2 houses down had brought over. You eat too, Mom. Theo watched her portion out the oatmeal into 2 bowls, leaving none for herself. I'll grab something at school. The lie came easily now. Kate survived on coffee and the remains of the children's lunches. By 7, she had them on the bus to Jefferson Elementary. Then she drove across town to Roosevelt Middle School, where she substituted. Some weeks 4 days of work. Some weeks none. The uncertainty made budgeting impossible, but she took every assignment, teaching 7th grade English one day and 5th grade social studies the next. At 2:30, Kate drove to the Garden District for her afternoon shift at Morrison's General Store, a family-owned hardware shop. She stocked shelves, operated the register, helped customers find screws and washers and brackets. The owner, Mrs. Adelaide Morgan, asked no questions about Kate's circumstances, but seemed to understand them. She paid Kate in cash every Friday, adding an extra $20 she always claimed was overtime. "You worked hard this week." Mrs. Morgan would press the bills into Kate's hand. "Take the kids for ice cream." Kate never took the kids for ice cream. The extra 20 went into the coffee can hidden in the kitchen cabinet, emergency money for the crisis always waiting around the next corner. By 6, Kate was home racing to prepare dinner before heading out again. The children walked home from the bus stop together, Theo watching over Evie like a fierce guardian. They'd have started homework at the kitchen table, the one battered piece Grace Holloway's nephew had left. Dinner was whatever Kate could make in 20 minutes. Pasta with canned sauce, rice and beans, grilled cheese sandwiches. She'd learned to cook without recipes, combining whatever cost least into something that would fill growing children. "How was school?" she'd ask, while stirring pots and checking homework simultaneously. "Fine," Theo's standard answer. He'd stopped sharing stories the way he used to when Nate would come home. Evie was more forthcoming. "Mrs. Porter said my watercolor of the oak tree was the best she's seen from a 4th grader. She wants to enter it in the district art show." Eleanor Porter, the art teacher. Kate had learned that Pine Street existed in a small world where coincidences piled up like gifts from a universe that occasionally remembered to be kind. "That's wonderful, sweetheart." Kate plated the food, trying not to notice how small the portions were. "Your father would be so proud." The mention of Nate still hurt a sharp edge that caught in her throat. But Kate had learned that avoiding his name hurt worse. The children needed to remember. At 7, Kate would leave for her evening job tutoring high school students in their wealthy homes. She'd sit at kitchen islands that cost more than her annual salary and help teenagers understand history while their parents attended charity galas. The irony was not lost on her. By day, she struggled to afford groceries. By night, she sat in homes with wine cellars and home theaters. "Mrs. Morrison, I don't get why the peasants were so mad." 17-year-old Brittany Matthews stared at her textbook with glazed eyes. Kate thought about the oatmeal she'd skipped that morning, the electricity bill she'd have to pay late again, the cardboard she'd been padding Theo's worn shoes with. "Imagine you're starving." Kate kept her voice even. "You watch your children go hungry while the people who rule you have more food than they could ever eat. Imagine knowing the system is designed to keep you powerless. What would you be willing to do to change that?" Brittany considered this. "I guess I'd be pretty mad." "Mad enough for revolution." Kate closed the textbook. Revolutions don't start because people want change. They start because people have nothing left to lose. She drove home through streets that grew progressively darker as she approached Pine Street. The streetlights worked intermittently here. The sidewalks were cracked and dangerous. But Grace Holloway left her porch light on every night, a small beacon guiding Kate home. By 10, Kate would be at the kitchen table with papers to grade and lesson plans to prepare. She worked until midnight most nights, then collapsed into bed for 5 hours before starting again. This was survival. This was single motherhood with no safety net and 2 children depending on her. Absolutely. The house slowly yielded to their efforts. Kate learned home repair through YouTube videos and library books. She taught herself to patch drywall, replace tiles, snake drains. Theo worked beside her on weekends, holding the ladder while she painted passing tools like a surgical assistant. "Hand me the Phillips head." Kate's voice echoed from inside the bathroom cabinet where she was fixing a leaking pipe. Theo passed her the screwdriver with confidence. "Is it supposed to spray water like that?" "No." Kate emerged, soaked. "But I'm learning." They fixed the front steps together, salvaging wood from a construction site where Kate had asked permission to take scraps. The new steps weren't beautiful, but they were level and sturdy and safe. Evie painted the kitchen soft yellow, mixing discount paint samples. The color was inexact, more butter than sunshine, but it warmed the room. She added a mural along one wall, flowers and birds, that reminded Kate of the garden they'd left behind. The neighbors on Pine Street were nothing like the polite strangers from the townhouse. Margaret Brennan taught Kate basic plumbing on Sunday afternoons. Mr. Holloway, Grace's nephew, appeared periodically with tools and lessons. The secret to fixing anything is patience and the right tool. He showed Kate how to replace a light fixture. Rush it and you'll electrocute yourself. Take your time and you've got light. Grace had become the grandmother the children lost when Vivian chose property rights over family bonds. She appeared most evenings with containers of soup, always claiming she'd made too much. "I don't know my own strength in the kitchen anymore." Grace would set the container on the counter. "Used to cook for 5. Now it's just me, and I keep making enough for an army." Kate knew Grace was lying, knew the soup was made specifically for them, that the elderly woman was sacrificing her own budget to feed children who weren't hers. But pride was a luxury Kate could no longer afford. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in January. Kate sat at the kitchen table after midnight and opened her bank statement. $47 until payday. The electricity bill was due. Theo's shoes were held together with duct tape. Evie needed art supplies for a school project, the kind that couldn't be substituted without marking her as the poor kid. Between the eviction and now, unexpected expenses had drained her savings. The car's alternator had failed in November, costing $400 she didn't have. Theo had needed antibiotics for strep throat in December, another $120 after insurance. The remaining savings had gone to security deposit and first month's utilities at Pine Street. Kate put her head down on the table and allowed herself 10 minutes of pure despair. She cried silently, shoulders shaking, hands pressed over her mouth to muffle any sound that might wake the children. When the 10 minutes ended, she went to the bathroom and washed her face with cold water. She looked at herself in the mirror. New lines around her eyes, gray threading through her hair, but also something harder in her expression: determination, resilience, the stubborn refusal to quit. In the bedroom, she kept Nate's few possessions in a box under her bed. She pulled it out now, searching for comfort. His watch, his wedding ring, old photographs, and there, tucked between photo albums, a small leather notebook she'd missed before. Kate opened it carefully. Inside, Nate's handwriting filled pages with sketches and notes, architectural projects he'd never built. Halfway through, she found a sealed envelope with her name. She held it for a long moment. A final goodbye. Instructions she wasn't ready to receive. But Nate had left her nothing else. No roadmap for this journey. Kate opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a business card. The business card was simple, elegant. Benjamin Whitmore, attorney at law. Meridian Foundation Trust. A phone number. An address downtown. The letter was longer. My dearest Kate, if you're reading this, I'm gone and my parents have shown you exactly who they are. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from them better. I'm sorry for all the secrets I kept thinking I was shielding you when really I was just afraid of your reaction. There's so much you don't know. About my grandmother's estate. About the foundation she created and left in my care. About the money I've been hiding from you for years while we lived on your salary and my modest architect's income. I need you to call Benjamin Whitmore. He's the only lawyer I trust, the only person outside the Sterling family who knows the full truth. He'll explain everything. He'll give you the tools you need to fight my parents if they try to take the children. And Kate, they will try. I know them better than they know themselves. I'm asking you to trust me one final time. Call Whitmore. Listen to what he has to say. And then decide what kind of life you want to build for yourself and our children. Whatever you choose, know that I loved you. That I love you still. That the best decision I ever made was choosing you over everything else. You were always enough. Don't let anyone make you forget that. All my love, Nate. Kate read the letter 3 times. Money. Foundation. Grandmother's estate. Nate had been wealthy. All those years of budgeting and choosing between tires and winter coats. He'd had money, the anger came first, hot and irrational. How dare he keep this from her? How dare he let her struggle when he could have made everything easier? But beneath the anger, understanding began to grow. Nate had known his parents had known what wealth did to people. He'd wanted their love to exist independent of money. Wanted Kate to choose him for himself. And he'd wanted to protect his children from becoming the kind of people Vivian and Harrison were. The business card sat on the table, white against scarred wood. Kate picked up her phone, then set it down. 1 a.m. Too late to call. Too late to make decisions that would change everything. But the phone rang anyway, startling her. The screen showed an unknown number. Kate almost ignored it, but something made her answer. Mrs. Morrison, a man's voice professional but warm. This is Benjamin Whitmore. I apologize for the late hour, but I've been trying to reach you for weeks. It's urgent that we speak. Kate's hand tightened on the phone. I just found your card. I was going to call you tomorrow. I'm glad you found it. Mrs. Morrison, I need to meet with you as soon as possible. There are legal matters regarding your late husband's estate that require your immediate attention. Could you come to my office tomorrow afternoon? Kate thought of her 3 jobs, the carefully balanced schedule that kept them fed and housed. Missing work meant missing pay. I work 3 jobs, Mr. Whitmore. I don't have time for meetings. Nate didn't leave an estate. He left me 2 children and a world of debt. Mrs. Morrison. Whitmore's voice gentled. Please, just give me 1 hour. I promise it will be worth your time. Something in his tone convinced her. 2 o'clock tomorrow. I can take a late lunch from the hardware store. Perfect. I'll text you the address. And Mrs. Morrison. What I have to tell you will change everything. The law offices of Whitmore and Associates occupied the 15th floor of a glass tower downtown. The lobby was marble and modern art, and the receptionist looked at Kate's thrift store dress with barely concealed disdain. I have an appointment with Mr. Whitmore. Kate kept her voice steady. Of course. 15th floor. The elevator is to your right. Benjamin Whitmore's office was nothing like Kate expected. Books lined every wall, legal volumes mixed with novels and poetry. Family photographs crowded his desk. The furniture was expensive but comfortable. Whitmore himself was younger than his formal phone manner suggested, late 40s with prematurely gray hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He stood when Kate entered. Mrs. Morrison, thank you for coming. He gestured to a leather chair. Please sit. Can I get you anything, coffee, water? Answers. Kate sat on the edge of the chair. Your card mentioned a foundation trust. I don't understand what that has to do with me. Whitmore opened a thick folder. Your late husband, Nathaniel Sterling Morrison, was the primary trustee of the Meridian Foundation, a charitable trust established by his maternal grandmother 40 years ago. I know Nate's grandmother left him some money. Kate's hands twisted in her lap. But we never touched it. He said it was complicated, tied up in trusts. The Meridian Foundation is worth approximately $200 million. Whitmore said it calmly as if discussing the weather. Nathaniel was the sole trustee with full discretionary authority over its distribution and management. The room tilted. Kate gripped the chair arms. That's not possible. We lived on my teacher's salary. We clipped coupons. Nate drove a 10-year-old car because those were his choices. Whitmore withdrew a letter. Nathaniel left very specific instructions about when and how you should learn about the foundation. He wanted you to wait 1 full year after his death. He wanted you to prove to yourself that you could raise your children independently, that you possessed the strength and character he always knew you had. Kate's anger reignited. He wanted me to prove myself. I've been working 3 jobs. My children eat oatmeal for breakfast because I can't afford anything else. My son puts cardboard in his shoes. And you're telling me there was money the entire time. He wanted you to understand something crucial. Whitmore's voice was gentle but firm. That your worth had nothing to do with his money. That you were capable of providing for your children through your own strength. That the life you built together was based on love, not financial security. Kate stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Below, the city spread out in glass and steel and wealth that had always existed just out of her reach. This is insane. Mrs. Morrison, there's more. Whitmore waited until she turned back. The foundation has been operating continuously since Nate's death, managed by an interim board. But according to his will, you are now the primary trustee. All decisions about distributions, investments, and charitable giving flow through you. I don't know anything about managing money. Kate's voice rose slightly. I can barely balance my checkbook. You'll have help. I'll guide you through the legal requirements. We have financial advisors, accountants, specialists in charitable giving. But the foundation's direction is yours to determine. Whitmore pulled out another document. There's something else. The foundation has been quietly funding various programs throughout the city. Programs you and your children have been benefiting from. He spread photographs across the desk. Kate recognized the elementary school art program Evie attended, the math competition team Theo had joined, after-school tutoring services. All of these are supported by Meridian Foundation grants, Whitmore explained. Your husband set them up years ago. He created a safety net without you knowing it existed. He's been taking care of you even from beyond the grave. Kate sank back into the chair, overwhelmed. The art supplies Evie had found under the floorboard, the scholarships and programs, all of it carefully planned, lovingly arranged, hidden in plain sight. Why didn't he just tell me? The question came out broken. Whitmore handed her an envelope. He left this for you, to be opened when you learn the truth. Inside was a letter in Nate's handwriting dated 2 weeks before his death. My dearest Kate, I know you're angry with me right now. I know the secrecy seems cruel, but I need you to understand something. I grew up watching money destroy my parents' capacity for genuine human connection. Everything in their world had a price tag, including love, including family. When I met you, I saw someone who valued people over possessions, who measured success by the joy she brought to her students, rather than the size of her paycheck. I fell in love with your values, your integrity, your refusal to compromise who you were for anyone. And I was terrified that knowledge of my wealth would change you, that you'd start to see yourself through my parents' eyes as somehow less than them. So I hid it. I chose to live simply because simple felt true. Because our tiny apartment and our yard sale furniture and our budget grocery shopping were more real to me than anything money could buy. I wanted our children to understand that happiness doesn't come from having things. It comes from loving people and being loved in return. I wanted them to see you, to really see you before they learned about the money, to understand that their mother is the strongest, most capable person I've ever known. Not because of wealth, but despite its absence. If you're reading this, you've survived the hardest year of your life. You've raised our children alone. You've provided for them. You've taught them resilience and resourcefulness and the value of working for what you have. You've proven what I always believed about you. The money is just a tool, Kate. It doesn't define you. It doesn't change who you are or what you've accomplished. Use it if you want. Ignore it if you prefer. But know that whether you take a single dollar from the foundation or leave it untouched, You've already given our children the most valuable inheritance anyone could receive. You've shown them what real strength looks like. I love you. I trust you. And I'm so proud of you. Always, Nate. Kate read through tears that made the words swim and blur. She understood now what Nate had been trying to teach her. That she was capable. That she had always been worthy. What happens if I refuse the trusteeship? She looked up at Whitmore. What if I don't want the money? The foundation would dissolve, and the assets would go to various charities according to backup provisions. But, Mrs. Morrison, I'd encourage you to think carefully. The foundation does real good in this community. The programs it funds change lives. Your husband built something meaningful. The question isn't whether you deserve it. The question is what you'll do with it. Kate thought about Evie's face when she'd learned about the art program, about Theo's pride at making the math team, about countless other children benefiting from programs funded by a foundation created by a man they'd never meet. I need time. She stood clutching Nate's letter. I need to think about all of this, of course. But, Mrs. Morrison, there's one more thing. Whitmore's expression grew serious. Word has gotten out about the foundation. Your in-laws have learned about your trusteeship. I expect they'll be taking action soon. Kate's stomach dropped. What kind of action? I can't say for certain. But the Sterlings are not people who accept losing control quietly. Whatever they do, you need to be prepared. The formal letter arrived 3 days later, delivered by courier to the hardware store, where Kate was restocking paint supplies. She signed for it with trembling hands, knowing what it would contain. Sterling and Sterling attorneys at law. Petition for emergency custody. The state of Connecticut versus Catherine Morrison. Kate's vision blurred as she read the accusations. Inadequate living conditions. Financial instability. Emotional neglect. Failure to provide appropriate educational opportunities. Failure to utilize available resources for the children's benefit. The court date was set for 6 months away. 6 months to prepare. 6 months to prove that she was a fit mother despite living in a house with peeling paint. 6 months to demonstrate that love and determination counted for more than country club memberships and private school tuition. She called Whitmore from the store's break room. They're suing for custody. They're actually suing to take my children. I know. Whitmore's voice was calm. I received notice this morning. Mrs. Morrison, listen carefully. You have 2 choices. You can reveal your trusteeship of the foundation, demonstrate your financial resources, and end this lawsuit immediately. Or you can fight them on your own terms with what you've already built. Kate thought about Nate's letter, about the year she'd spent proving she could provide for her children without money, about the values she'd been teaching Evie and Theo, that worth came from character rather than wealth. If she revealed the foundation now, she'd prove the Sterlings right. She'd demonstrate that money was what mattered, that resources trumped love. I'm going to fight them. The words came out steadier than she felt. I'm going to prove that I'm a good mother regardless of my bank account. Are you sure? Whitmore asked gently. "This won't be easy. They have unlimited resources. They'll hire investigators, expert witnesses." Kate thought about Evie's paintings showing emotional healing, about Theo's determination to fix their broken house, about the community on Pine Street that had welcomed them without judgment, about Grace Holloway and Margaret Brennan, and Eleanor Porter and all the people who had shown her that family was built through choice rather than blood. "I'm sure." Kate's voice was steel now. "Let them bring everything they have. I'll show them what real strength looks like." Outside the break room window, she could see the street where ordinary people went about their lives, working and struggling and loving and surviving. Her people now. Her community. Vivian and Harrison Sterling thought they could win through money and lawyers and social pressure. But they'd never understood what Nate had known from the beginning, that Catherine Morrison was stronger than anyone imagined, that she'd been tested by fire and emerged unbroken, that she would fight for her children with everything she had, and everything she had was more than enough. The battle was coming. Let it come. She was ready. 4 months into preparing for the custody battle, Catherine Morrison stood in Grace Holloway's kitchen, watching the elderly woman organize an army of witnesses. 47 people had agreed to testify on Kate's behalf. Teachers and neighbors' parents from Jefferson Elementary. The librarian who'd helped Theo find architecture books. The crossing guard who'd watched Kate walk her children to the bus stop every morning regardless of weather. Grace had transformed her dining room into a war room. Lists covered the table. Timelines. Evidence logs. Photographs of Evie's art shows and Theo's math competition ribbons. Documentation of every moment that proved Kate Morrison was not just an adequate mother, but an extraordinary one. "We're going to bury them in truth." Grace's weathered hands moved across the papers with military precision. "They think money wins fights. They've never faced organized determination." Kate studied the faces in the photographs, her children laughing at a neighborhood barbecue, Evie presenting her painting at the school art fair, Theo helping Mr. Holloway repair Mrs. Walsh's fence. These were the moments the Sterlings had never seen, would never understand. Margaret Brennan arrived with more documentation. Report cards showing both children on the honor roll. Teacher testimonials written in careful longhand. Eleanor Porter, the art teacher, had written 3 pages about Evie's talent and emotional growth. "The girl's gift is remarkable," Eleanor's letter read. "But more remarkable is the mother who created an environment where that gift could flourish despite tremendous adversity." Catherine Morrison teaches her children that art matters, that beauty can be created from struggle, that their voices deserve to be heard. These are not lessons money can buy. Theo's math teacher had been equally eloquent. "Theodore Morrison arrived in my classroom carrying burdens no 10-year-old should bear. I watched him transform from a child frozen by responsibility into a student excited by possibility. His mother gave him permission to be young again, to explore and fail and learn." Kate read these words and felt something break open in her chest. She'd been so focused on survival that she hadn't realized she was succeeding at something more important. She was raising children who were kind and creative and resilient. The local newspaper had run a story 3 weeks earlier. Single mother fights wealthy in-laws for custody of children. The reporter, a young woman named Sarah Mitchell, who covered human interest stories, had spent an afternoon on Pine Street interviewing neighbors and photographing the house Kate and her children had slowly rebuilt. The article hadn't pulled punches. It detailed the eviction, the 3 jobs, the community effort to support a woman abandoned by her husband's wealthy family. It quoted Grace Holloway saying, "Catherine Morrison is twice the parent those sterling people could ever hope to be. Money can't buy what she gives those children every single day." Public opinion had shifted dramatically. Letters to the editor poured in supporting Kate. The comment section online exploded with people sharing their own stories of being judged by wealthier relatives. 3 different legal aid societies had offered to represent Kate pro bono, though she'd already retained Benjamin Whitmore using a fraction of foundation resources. "You can fight them with one hand tied behind your back," Whitmore had advised. "Or you can use the tools available to you. Pride is admirable, but not when it costs you your children." So Kate had compromised. She'd kept the foundation secret from the kids and from the Sterlings. But she'd allowed Whitmore to use foundation resources to build an impeccable legal case, expert witnesses, child psychologists, financial advisors who could demonstrate that Kate's modest lifestyle was a choice based on values rather than inability. The transformation in Kate herself was visible. The exhausted woman who'd stood in the rain at Nate's funeral had been replaced by someone harder, more certain. She no longer apologized for her circumstances. She no longer felt shame about the peeling paint or the second-hand clothes. She'd learned what Nate had tried to teach her, that strength came from character, not circumstances. Evie had created a painting specifically for the court case, working on it for weeks. The piece showed 3 figures standing in front of a small house. The house glowed from within, warm light spilling from every window. Behind the figures, barely visible, a 4th form made of stars and moonlight kept watch. "It's us," Evie explained, "and Dad. He's still protecting us even though we can't see him." Kate hung the painting in the living room where she could see it every morning. Some days it was the only thing that kept her moving forward. Theo had taken a different approach. He'd written an essay titled "Why I Want to Stay with Mom." His teacher had requested permission to submit it to the court as evidence. Kate had read it once and then hidden it away because reading it made her cry so hard she couldn't function. "My mom works 3 jobs so we can have a house and food and everything we need. She fixes things herself instead of calling someone because she wants to teach us that we can solve our own problems. She never complains even though I know she's tired. She never makes us feel bad for not having money. She makes us feel rich because we have each other. The Sterlings have a big house and a pool and lots of money. But they threw us away when we needed them most. My mom never threw us away. She held on tighter. That's the difference between being wealthy and being rich. My mom might not be wealthy, but we're the richest family I know." The Sterlings had hired a private investigator. Kate had noticed him following her for 2 weeks. A man in his 40s who tried too hard to blend into neighborhoods, where everyone knew everyone else. Grace had confronted him directly one afternoon, marching up to his car with the fearlessness of someone who'd survived the Great Depression. "You can tell the Sterlings that Catherine Morrison is the best mother those children could ask for." Grace had tapped on his window until he rolled it down. "And you can tell them that this neighborhood protects its own." The investigator had left and not returned, but his report had apparently been submitted. Benjamin Whitmore had seen it during discovery. Their own investigator gave you a glowing review. Whitmore had sounded amused. He documented your work ethic, your dedication to the children, your community involvement. His conclusion was that you're providing an excellent home environment despite limited financial resources. The night before the scheduled court date, the Sterlings' attorney requested an emergency meeting. Not at the courthouse, at the Sterling family estate. "It's unusual." Whitmore frowned at the formal invitation. "But it might be a settlement offer. They may be realizing their case is weaker than they thought. Or it's a trap." Kate studied the heavy cardstock, the embossed letterhead. "Probably both." Whitmore agreed. "Do you want to go?" Kate thought about it. The smart move would be to refuse to meet only in neutral territory, but something in her wanted to face them on their home ground. Wanted them to see what they'd tried to destroy and failed. "I'll go, but the children come with me." Whitmore started to object, then stopped. "Actually, that's brilliant. Let the Sterlings see what they're really fighting for." The Sterling estate sprawled across 15 acres of prime Connecticut real estate. The main house was a Georgian mansion featured in Architectural Digest. Formal gardens, tennis courts, a pool house larger than Kate's entire residence on Pine Street. Kate pulled up in her aging Honda, noting how the car looked like a mistake against the manicured perfection. Evie and Theo sat in the back seat, both dressed in their church clothes. Not expensive, but clean and carefully pressed. "Remember what we talked about?" Kate turned to face her children. "You're polite but honest. You don't have to pretend to want something you don't want. Your feelings matter." Theo's jaw was set with determination. Evie clutched her portfolio containing her paintings. She'd insisted on bringing them. Vivian answered the door herself, dressed in cashmere and pearls. Her expression when she saw Kate was carefully neutral, but something flickered in her eyes when she looked at Evie and Theo. "Catherine, children." She stepped back. "Harrison is waiting in the library." The interior was exactly as Kate remembered. Antique furniture, original artwork. Everything perfect and untouchable and cold. The kind of house where children were expected to be seen and not heard. Harrison stood by the fireplace, flanked by 2 attorneys Kate didn't recognize. Benjamin Whitmore entered behind them, his presence a quiet reassurance. "Thank you for coming." Harrison's tone was formal. "Please sit." Kate remained standing. "You requested this meeting. What do you want?" Vivian moved to a sideboard and poured something amber into a crystal glass. Her hands trembled slightly. The first crack Kate had ever seen in her mother-in-law's composure. "We've reviewed the evidence you've submitted to the court." One of the Sterling attorneys spoke, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes. "Your community support is impressive. The testimonials from teachers and neighbors present a compelling narrative. It's not a narrative. Kate kept her voice level. It's the truth. I'm a good mother. I've provided a loving, stable home for my children, despite your best efforts to make that impossible. Stable is a generous word for a house that's falling apart in a neighborhood with one of the highest crime rates in the county. The attorney countered. Our neighborhood has the lowest crime rate it's had in 20 years. Theo spoke up, his young voice cutting through the adult conversation. I researched it for a school project, and our house isn't falling apart. We fixed it. Mom taught us how. Evie opened her portfolio, pulling out painting after painting. These are my art projects from this year. Mrs. Porter says I'm the most talented student she's had in 15 years of teaching. She says I have a gift. She spread the paintings across Harrison's expensive desk. The progression was undeniable. The final painting showed their house on Pine Street, glowing like a lantern. The three of them standing together, Nate's spirit, watching over them in starlight. Vivian moved closer, her glass forgotten. Kate watched her mother-in-law's face as she studied the paintings, saw something shift in her expression. The hard mask of judgment cracking to reveal the grief underneath. She draws like Nathaniel did. Vivian's voice was barely a whisper. When he was young, before we convinced him that architecture was more practical than art, he used to paint light exactly like this. Evie looked up at her grandmother. Dad taught me to look for light in dark places. He said that's what artists do. We find beauty even when everything seems broken. Vivian's hand reached toward the painting, then pulled back as if afraid to touch it. I didn't know he taught you that. I didn't know he taught you anything. He taught us lots of things. Theo's voice was defensive. He taught me how to use tools and fix stuff. He taught us about buildings and how they're made. He taught us that the best things in life are the people you love, not the things you own. Kate watched Harrison's face. The senior partner, the man who'd built a legal empire on ruthless efficiency, was staring at his grandson with an expression Kate had never seen before. Something like recognition. Something like regret. You sound exactly like him, Harrison said quietly. When he was your age, he used to argue with me about values and priorities. I always thought I was teaching him to be realistic. I didn't realize I was teaching him to disagree with everything I stood for. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling. Kate stepped forward. You didn't ask us here to reminisce. What do you want? Vivian set down her glass with a shaking hand. We want to know why you're being so stubborn. Why you won't accept our help. Why you insist on struggling when we could make everything easier. Because your help isn't free. Kate's voice was steel wrapped in silk. Your help comes with conditions. It comes with judgment and control and the expectation that I'll raise my children according to your values instead of mine. You threw us out of our home. You told me I wasn't good enough to be their mother. And now you want to take them away because I've proven I don't need you. We never said you weren't good enough. Vivian's voice cracked. You didn't have to say it. Kate gestured around the library. Everything about you says it. The way you look at my clothes. The way you talk about my job. The way you dismissed every choice Nate and I made. You thought money made you better than us. You thought it made you better than your own son. Harrison flinched as if she'd struck him. We love Nathaniel. Did you? Kate's question hung in the air like an accusation. Because love doesn't come with conditions. Love doesn't require your children to become who you want them to be. Love accepts people as they are. Vivian sank into a chair, her perfect posture finally collapsing. We failed him. We know that now. We pushed and criticized and tried to control him, and he spent his entire adult life trying to escape us. And when he died, we realized we'd lost him years before the accident. We'd lost him the day we made him choose between our approval and his happiness. Tears ran down her carefully made-up face, carving tracks through expensive foundation. When you and the children left, when we stood in that house and watched you pack, I told myself we were doing the right thing, that we were protecting our grandchildren from a life of struggle. But the truth is, we were trying to claim the only pieces of Nathaniel we had left. We were trying to keep some connection to our son, even if it meant destroying what he loved most. Evie moved to her grandmother's side, this sensitive 10-year-old, who understood grief better than anyone her age should. She held out one of her paintings, the one showing their family complete with Nate's spirit watching over them. You didn't lose him, Grandma. He's still here. He's in me when I paint. He's in Theo when he builds things. He's in Mom when she refuses to give up. You can't take pieces of someone. You have to love the whole thing they created, even if it doesn't look the way you want it. Vivian took the painting with shaking hands, studying it through her tears. You're so much like him. Both of you. I see him in your eyes, in the way you stand up for what you believe in. She looked up at Kate. I see him in the way your mother raised you. Nathaniel chose well. We just couldn't see it because we were too busy being angry that he didn't choose what we wanted. Harrison moved to stand beside his wife, his hand on her shoulder. We can't undo what we've done. We can't give you back the months we took from you. But we can stop making it worse. He looked at the attorneys. Withdraw the petition. Immediately. The attorneys exchanged glances. Mr. Sterling, we've invested considerable resources. I said withdraw it. Harrison's voice carried the authority of decades in courtrooms. File whatever paperwork is necessary. The custody case is over. Benjamin Whitmore leaned close to Kate. You should get this in writing. Get their agreement to regular visitation with clear boundaries about not undermining your parenting decisions. Kate nodded. I want regular visits, but they happen at my house on my terms. You're welcome to be part of their lives, but you don't get to criticize how I'm raising them. You don't get to pressure them about schools or activities or anything else. You accept them as they are, or you don't get access at all. Agreed, Harrison said without hesitation. We'll have our attorneys draw up a formal agreement. Vivian stood moving toward Kate with hesitation. May I, could I hug them? The children. Kate looked at Evie and Theo, leaving the choice to them. Both children moved forward, allowing their grandmother to embrace them. Vivian held them like they might disappear, her tears falling into Evie's hair. I'm sorry. She whispered it over and over. I'm so sorry for everything. On the drive home, the children were quiet in the back seat. Finally, Theo spoke. Are we really not going to court? We're really not going to court, Kate confirmed. It's over. Did we win? Evie's question was tentative. Kate thought about that. We didn't win or lose. We just helped them understand something they couldn't see before. It feels like winning, Theo said with satisfaction. The house on Pine Street welcomed them home with its familiar imperfections. Peeling paint and creaking floors and all the small flaws they'd been slowly fixing together. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Earned, built, loved. 2 years later, Catherine Morrison stood in the downtown gallery watching 12-year-old Genevieve explain her painting to a reporter. The exhibition was titled Families and featured Evie's portraits of different kinds of love, single parents and blended families and elderly neighbors caring for young children. Each painting celebrated the truth that family was defined by devotion rather than biology. I want people to see that love comes in lots of different shapes. Evie told the reporter with the confidence of a child who'd learned her voice mattered. My mom taught me that the most important thing isn't what your family looks like, but how much you care about each other. The exhibition was funded by the Meridian Foundation, though that fact wasn't advertised. Kate had finally revealed the truth about the foundation to her children. 1 year after the custody case was dismissed, he wanted us to know we could be happy without money first. Evie had said, grasping the concept immediately. So we'd understand it's a tool, not who we are. The foundation now supported 23 different programs across the state. Emergency housing assistance, literacy programs, college scholarships, art supplies for schools in low-income neighborhoods. Kate still taught part-time at Jefferson Elementary, still lived in the house on Pine Street, though it was now fully renovated and quite charming. Still drove the same Honda. The modest lifestyle wasn't about poverty anymore. It was about choice, about values. Theodore had discovered a gift for mathematics. He spent his summers now working with foundation scholarship recipients, helping younger students understand that academic achievement was possible regardless of economic circumstances. I want to help kids who think they're not smart enough for college because their families don't have money, he'd told Kate. I want them to know that being poor doesn't mean being stupid and being rich doesn't make you better than anyone else. Vivian and Harrison had become regular fixtures in their lives, visiting every Sunday for dinner at Kate's house. The relationship was still careful, still healing, but genuine affection had begun to grow. Vivian had taken particular interest in Evie's artistic development, funding a mentorship program that connected young artists with professionals. Your grandmother was an artist before she married my father, Harrison had told Evie during one visit. She gave it up because it wasn't considered appropriate for someone in her social position. I think she sees a second chance in you. Grace Holloway had moved into a senior living community around the corner from Pine Street, close enough to still be family. She'd been at the gallery opening tonight, beaming with pride. Benjamin Whitmore appeared at Kate's elbow holding 2 glasses of wine. Quite a turnout. The Foundation's Youth Arts program is getting excellent press from this exhibition. Evie did that herself. Kate accepted the wine. All we did was make sure she had the supplies and the space to create. Have you decided about the community center proposal? The Sterlings had offered to fund a community center renovation in Nathaniel's name. Kate had been reviewing the plans for weeks. I think it could work, but only if we hire local contractors and create job training programs as part of the construction. No outside firms coming in to do work that people in the neighborhood could learn to do themselves. Nathaniel would approve, Whitmore said quietly. Kate spotted Theo across the room explaining one of Evie's paintings to the Sterlings with earnest intensity. Harrison listened with full attention, learning too late what he'd missed. Vivian stood beside Evie, her hand resting lightly on her granddaughter's shoulder. Not possessive anymore. Just proud. Just present. The night wound down slowly. Evie's paintings sold to collectors who would display them across the state. The proceeds went directly back into the Foundation's Arts Education Fund. Driving home through familiar streets, Kate thought about the journey that had brought them here. The devastation of loss. The humiliation of eviction. The exhausting grind of survival. The slow reconstruction of life from broken pieces. Every moment of struggle had taught them something essential about resilience and dignity, and the true meaning of wealth. "Mom." Evie's voice came from the back seat. "Do you think Dad knows about tonight?" Kate looked in the rearview mirror at her daughter's face. So like Nate's, it still hurts sometimes. "I think he knows. I think he's been watching over us all along." "I painted something for him," Evie said softly. "It's at home. I couldn't put it in the exhibition because it's too personal." "Can I see it?" Kate asked. "When we get home." The painting waited on Evie's easel, a piece she'd worked on privately for months. It showed Nate in his study surrounded by architectural sketches and blueprints. But instead of designing buildings, he was designing their lives. The foundation paperwork. The safety net of programs and grants. The careful planning that had protected them even after death. In the painting, Nate looked peaceful, complete. Like a man who'd accomplished exactly what he'd set out to do. Below the image, Evie had written a single line in her careful script. "The greatest architecture is the life you build for the people you love." Kate stood in her daughter's room looking at this tribute to a man who'd loved them enough to teach them. They didn't need his money. Who'd believed in Kate's strength, even when she didn't believe in it herself. Who'd given his children the gift of knowing their worth came from character rather than inheritance. "It's perfect." She pulled Evie close. "He would love it." That night after the children were asleep, Kate sat on the front porch of their house on Pine Street. The steps she'd rebuilt with Theo were solid under her feet. The garden Evie had painted into existence bloomed with late summer flowers. Grace's porch light glowed 2 houses down. She thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago, standing in the rain at Nate's funeral, terrified and lost. That woman had been stronger than she knew, strong enough to work 3 jobs, strong enough to learn plumbing and carpentry and 1,000 other skills, strong enough to fight for her children against people with unlimited resources and win through nothing but determination and community and love. The foundation had given her financial security, but long before she'd known about the money, she'd discovered something more valuable. That her children were thriving not despite their circumstances, but because of the values she'd modeled. That wealth measured in love and resilience and community was the only kind that truly mattered. Nathaniel Sterling Morrison had left her $200 million, but his greatest gift had been the faith that she could raise their children well regardless of her bank account. He'd trusted her with everything that mattered, and she'd proven that trust was justified. Kate stood and went inside, climbing the stairs to check on her sleeping children one final time. Evie clutched her stuffed rabbit, the one Nate had won her at a carnival years ago. Theo slept with one hand hanging off the bed, his father's watch on his wrist, though it was still too large for him. Kate adjusted their blankets, kissed their foreheads, and whispered the words she said every night. You are loved. You are capable. You are exactly who you're supposed to be. In the morning, there would be foundation meetings and school conferences and the endless work of building something meaningful from the tools they'd been given. But tonight, there was just this: a mother and her children safe and together in a home they'd created through love and determination. They had everything that mattered. They always had. And that made them the richest family in the world.